Hello everyone, good afternoon from myself and Matt.
Hello.
Welcome to this first ever Hands-On with Maxon series. We are so happy to have you guys. So thank you to everyone, first of all, who is here live with us. And thank you to everyone else who's registered. We had so many of you, and we're so thrilled that we can kind of bring this Cinema 4D beginners workshop to you guys. So yeah, thanks to anyone watching the recording later on. So hands-on with Maxon. So what exactly is it we're doing over the next kind of 6 weeks? So our plan is basically to get you guys comfortable inside Cinema 4D in just 6 weeks. So this is aimed at anyone who maybe has never used Cinema 4D before, never used 3D software, or maybe you're just kind of like getting started and you've just started learning it, or maybe you're a student learning in college or university. This is aimed at you. However, that being said, if you are a more kind of advanced C4D user, this is definitely going to have some tips and tricks and techniques that is also going to be kind of suitable for you guys. So you might be using a tool in a particular way, and then you might find out through the next 6 weeks it can be used in all these other different ways. So by all means, it's going to be kind of suitable for everybody. Also, hi to Farbod and to Greg. So we have our kind of question and chat interactive system on GoToWebinar. So please say hi, we'll shout you guys out, ask us questions throughout the next 2 hours. We want it to be as interactive as possible. We're here, with you guys today. So understanding the course, so understanding this next 6 weeks. So we split it down into 6 topics. And me and Matt had a bit of a chat about this a couple of months ago and sort of really defined what we thought were kind of, the main disciplines and the main topics inside of Cinema 4D, especially for someone who's maybe never used it before or in that kind of like beginner group. So week 1, which is today, is all about getting started in Cinema 4D. So if you've never opened the software before, we're going to be kind of going from absolute zero. So kind of here is the interface, here are the tools, the managers, and how we can get started creating some stuff in Cinema, because that's in the day what we want to do, right? We want to make some cool stuff. So that's what it's going to be about. We're going to look at primitives, so like all the things that are within Cinema 4D that we have access to, as well as things called deformers. And if you don't know what those are, believe me, by the end of today's session, you will. Week 2 is going to be all things modeling. So, splines, we've got our generators, subdivision surface. So that's going to be a super cool week. Week 3 is then going to be lighting and texturing. So this is going to be like a really fun topic. So we're going to go from creating some stuff inside weeks 1 and 2, and then we're going to make it look super cool inside of Cinema. We're going to touch on a little bit of Redshift, but if you don't use Redshift, don't worry, because majority of the next 6 weeks and the lighting and materials section will be on native Cinema 4D, so don't worry. Week 4, animation dynamics. So that's going to be so much fun, looking at the really powerful dynamics simulation system inside of C4D and kind of, animating some of the elements that we maybe have created in the previous weeks. Week 5, hands down, the week I am most excited for. Like, if you know me, you know MoGraph is my favorite thing, if we're allowed to have one, inside of Cinema 4D. It is so quick and easy to pick up, and we can make some super cool stuff in no time at all. And then rounding it all off, final week, week 6, we're going to be doing all things rendering. And again, a little bit of Redshift, but most of it will be, standard and physical Cinema 4D stuff. So ambient occlusion, global illumination, and all those kind of optimization settings. Right, so who are we? So Matt, do you want to do a little intro about yourself?
Unmute is a good thing to do, isn't it, as well? So yeah, I forget to unmute. Hello, my name is Matt. I've worked for Maxon for 4.5 years now. I have been using Cinema 4D, this is for now 21 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so since version 6 on a PC, I've been using Cinema 4D and watched it grow an awful lot. from one thing to another. Before I worked for Maxon as a trainer, I was a college lecturer teaching animation, illustration, and games design. So I am very much used to teaching Cinema 4D to people. Over to you.
So you're all in good hands. So my experience isn't quite as good as Matt's here, but I've been working at Maxon for 6 years. I've only been a trainer for just over a year, but I was in the sales team before, teaching myself Cinema 4D every day as much as I could, doing a couple of tutorials for Cineversity, and recently, kind of over the next just over a year, was made a trainer. And you've probably seen us on some of these live webinars, some of these presentations. The regulars will know who we are. Cool, right, so let's get into it. So week 1, getting started. So what are we going to be doing today? So here are our session objectives. So we're going to learn how to navigate around the Cinema 4D interface, so what the managers are. So if you have no knowledge of Cinema 4D, we're going to be starting, from scratch for you guys. We're also going to have a look at some simple shortcut keys that are going to help us work faster and optimize our workflow. So don't worry, if we use some shortcuts, we'll make sure we tell you exactly what those are, and so you can get used to using those alongside us. We're going to learn how to create, move, scale, and rotate primitive objects inside of Cinema, and also understand how deformers work and how we can use these deformers to create and change our primitive objects in a non-destructive way. We're then going to look at Cinema 4D's asset browser, which has so much free stuff inside. So we've got 3D models, textures, like HDRI images, loads of quality assets that, especially at this stage, it's going to help us, make some nice looking renders before we even learn how to create materials. We can just kind of drag and drop them in. And then we're going to do a bit of a practical bit in the second half of this session. And we're going to build our own robot scene using primitive objects and deformers, which Matt is going to teach us all about in a sec. So we're going to be making this little dude here. Cool. So enough with the talking. Let's get started. Let's get into it. So Matt, if you want to,
I will steal the screen.
And also, big shout out to everyone else that's saying hi in the chat. So we've got Anders, Jonathan, you've got Greg. It's so nice to see everyone. Thank you so much. And Michael too, and Holly. It's so nice to see you all. Thanks for being here live. And keep the questions coming. Just let us know, have a chat with us. This is going to be, super interactive and super kind of follow along as well. That's the aim. And hi, Heidi.
So we've got 2 kind of sections to this. I'm doing the first 45 minutes and kind of going into the theory about all of the different things that we're going to be using. So feel free to stop me and hiccup and just kind of go, this isn't working, this isn't doing this, or something like that. I'm more theory based with what we're doing. Then I hand over to Elly for the fun half of making the little robot. Some of my stuff that I'm about to show you isn't particularly thrilling, but it is kind of necessary to kind of get you up and running for people who have either never used Cinema 4D before or never used 3D before. So here we go. Obligatory question, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Huzzah! Right. So I am demoing in Cinema 4D S24, which is our latest subscription version, and available for any students who are getting the Maxon 1 deal. You can see the layout that we have here, and I will go through some of that with you now. I'll go through more of it a little bit as we use some of the sections, but for the moment, I'm just going to give you a brief overview. So here we have in the central part, this is my viewport. This is where the 3D world occurs. This is our scene space, our infinite world. I'll talk about navigating my way through that in a minute. On the right-hand side, we have our Objects tab. This lets you see a list of all objects and things that you have in your scene. So it's a really useful kind of stage list of everything that you may have, be that objects, generators, deformers, lights, whatever. It's all there. There's a Takes tab there, which I won't cover, but it's not useful to know that there are tabs here to click between. Down the bottom, we have the attributes manager. This shows you the attributes for whatever it is you have selected, be that an object, you can see I've got my attributes there, or a tool, and it will change. So this is kind of like an inspector of whatever it is that you have selected, even to the point where it will show you stuff to do with the project, which you can get to by going to edit project settings, and you can see that I've got various project settings down there. It's a really useful area. We've got the layers tab, which again, I won't go through in this beginners purely because of time, and the structure menu, which I might just show you, but most of you will probably never need to be aware of ever, but it's there. Down the bottom, we have our coordinates manager. This manages, funnily enough, the coordinates of whatever it is that we have selected. And we have different coordinate systems. We have a world coordinate system, which is based on where everything is on the world 0. You can see here I've got this X, Y, and Z, this yellow, blue, and red axes here. This is world 0. And wherever my object is, it will change the coordinates here. But I've also got an object coordinate system, which I will get to a bit later, and that relates to where points and polygons are in relation to the cube or whatever object you have. We have our materials manager down the bottom. This is where we manage any materials that we wish to add to our objects. Again, we'll go into a lot more detail on that. A mini timeline down here, which allows me to just scrub through any animations and see any keyframes of any selected objects. On the left-hand side, we have our modes. So we have object mode, we have points, edges, and polygons, as well as axes. There's snapping and soloing available down there on the left, but we probably won't cover those greatly with the time allowed. And then in a tutorial that I once heard, this button is your friend. This is the undo button, which, as any other undo thing you can see, is Command, or if you're on a PC, Control Z. Undo and redo are where you'd expect them to be. We have selection tools, and then we have move, scale, and rotate. Again, we will use them shortly. We have the ability of choosing which axes gets locked off, and then we have what I refer to commonly as the stuff. This is all of the stuff of Cinema 4D. Not all of the stuff, but a lot of the stuff, and they even have drop downs of things where you can click and drag and you can see what other things there are available to you. There are multiple layouts in Cinema 4D as well, and you can fully customize this. I won't go into too much detail, but if you're interested in looking at different layouts that we have, go up to the top right hand corner, look at the animate layout, and you'll see we get a bigger timeline. Look at the sculpting layout, and you'll see that we've got access to the sculpting tools. You know, there's quite a lot of things that we can do that will give us different options, and again, all fully customizable, but we won't worry about that for the moment. If you ever muck up your layout so much, you can just go back to one of our normal layouts here in Cinema 4D and you should be good to go again. There are a few things before I get going on more about the layout and actually using Cinema that I refer to as kind of just little bits of housekeeping in the fun and excitement of edit and preferences. Okay. If you wish to change the interface language, then you can install different languages, so you can have different language files. You can see that we have this selection that you can choose from and install and restart Cinema 4D to have your own selected language. You may notice that some various bits of my layout are highlighted yellow. This is to do with the highlight features, and currently it's highlighting what is new in S24 or new, updated, changed, moved, or whatever. So that's quite useful. If you use the Mac menu bar at the top, you can see that I do. I'm actually going to change that, and I'm going to change that by unticking the Mac menu bar, clicking OK, and then I'm going to need to restart Cinema. So let me do that. No, I do not want to save anything, because then when it disappears, I will have Cinema 4D back like it is on Windows machine and like it was a few versions ago, that has the menus across the top rather than at the top bar. I'm old school, I prefer it that way, but that's just me. So under Edit and Preferences, I'm not going to go through all of these, don't worry. I'm not going to bore you for the next 4 hours going through each one of those. But something to be aware of, if I drop down to Files here, this is something that I want to let you know. By default, autosave is not on, okay? So you can tick that, and normally I think most of yours are set to 5. This means that Cinema 4D will autosave every 5 minutes. What it actually does is create a copy of your file, labeled whatever your file name is, and a date timestamp .back, B-A-K, to the project directory wherever you have your Cinema 4D stored. If you have it set to every 5 minutes, it will drive you insane, because Cinema 4D does freeze a little bit when it's saving, particularly large files. So if I were you, I would set that to every 30 minutes and set your copies to something like 14. That means it will save every half an hour until there are 14 files, and then it will delete the oldest one and put the newest one in. Now, for those of you who don't know, not only am I a trainer, I also work in tech support. So I deal with a lot of users who have one file that they've stored on a USB stick, and then they've taken it out too quickly before they've finished saving, and it's corrupted their file. And I get the, please, this is my final major project, and my project is due in tomorrow, can you save my file? I can only save what's there. So for students, please, I really recommend allowing autosave to save every 30 minutes, because even if something does die, you've lost half an hour of work. Okay, so enable that. Another thing really quickly is plugins. If you use plugins at all, you can add the folders here and point towards plugins if they don't automatically install. Other than that, I don't think there's too much more I'm going to go through that I feel you need to be aware of in the preferences. Obviously, go and have a look at some point on your own. One thing that's really useful, you can right click on any of these and you can do show help, and it will take you to our help file, and you can have a look and see, you can search for stuff depending on the version that you have installed as well. We've got 24, 23, 22, 21. You can actually search for the things that you want to find, and our help file is really helpful, full of stuff, and you will be able to get a better understanding of what things are. So if I right click on that particular element, can you see it takes me directly, viewports, preferences, units, Kelvin temperature mode, it takes me directly to that entry inside the help file. Most of them in these windows will do that, which is a really useful addition to Cinema 4D's contextual help stuff. Okay, that was a super quick rush through the layout. Is there any questions about that so far?
Not at the moment. There was one from Burke asking about autosave, but you got to it, so you read the mind.
I did, yes. Autosave is heaven, and yeah, certainly for tech support, I will say, please make sure you have it on. Cool. Right. Okay, then. Let's have a look at simply moving around the viewport.
Ooh, sorry, one sec. We have got another quick question.
Ooh.
Can you shift your panels around and save the layout?
Yes, you can. You can do as much as you want with this. So, really quick demonstration. Can you see these little, well, it's sort of, people call it the hamburger, but because it's got 3 stacks. But this little tripled line thing, if I click and hold that, I can move this around. You can see I'm getting that white bar. This says this is where I want to put it, and I can move things around. I can overlay stuff. So actually, if I wanted to click and drag that over my objects and have that tab, then I can move that there. So I've now got an objects tab, a view tab, and a takes all there. Again, you can bring up multiple windows, move everything around, and then you can go to Window, Customization, and you've got the ability of saving the layout as, which means you can give it a name and it will appear in your drop down for you to choose, or save as startup layout, which means this is how it will appear every time you load Cinema 4D. And it'll have in little brackets user, so it's always your user one, it knows what you're doing. You can do that. Again, if you muck it up completely or you don't like it, you can always just go back to one of our standard layouts up in the top right hand corner.
Cool. Also, so Tom is asked, how do we get our the icon, like, you know, you've got 16, 17, 18 on your icons there.
That's something that we made ourselves. As you can see, I, as tech support, have to go all the way back to at least 16. So it was driving me nuts trying to figure out which Cinema 4D was which. So I made my own. Did we share that before, Ellie, with other people?
I think so. What I'll do, I'll find that all those like icons and I'll put them on the project file over the next few days, and then we can always maybe this week at the end or next week at the end, we'll show you how you can actually add those on to them. It's super handy.
That's cool. I'm just looking at Kent's question. I might have to skip past that. I can't remember. It's possible the layouts become locked, corrupted maybe, but it would be difficult to see. If I were you, I'd raise a tech support question on that one and see if anybody can figure out why that particular layout is uneditable. And then we have a rendering question, which I will leave for the moment, and I will let you answer via text, Ellie.
Okay.
So quickly moving around the viewport. There are a variety of different ways of moving around my scene. So if I just create a cube, I now want to be able to move around my scene. And there are the manual buttons up here in the top right-hand corner. To use them, you click and hold with your left mouse button over one of them. So I click and hold with my left mouse button on that one, and I can pan. And this is panning from left to right, up and down. And then when I let go of my mouse button, it will stop. Okay, that one is quite simple. The second one is dollying. And this will move the camera closer and further back from the central point. You can see that that little crosshair appears. That is the central point where the central focus of my camera, and that is what it will always zoom dolly into. So if I move that with the pan and then do that, it will dolly into that. The third one along is rotate, and this allows me to rotate around that particular point wherever that central point has been created. Wherever that central point is situated on an object that has been created. So they're the three, and there are some shortcuts for those as well, for those people that like it. If you hold down the number 1 on your keyboard and use your left mouse button, you can pan. If you hold down 2 on your keyboard and left mouse button, you will dolly. Now this one is slightly different because it will dolly to wherever you click where your cursor is. So you can see I am choosing a different corner or edge to focus into by simply having my mouse there when I begin the dollying process. Equally, this works for the third one as well, which of course is rotate around. This will rotate around whichever particular area, again, wherever my crosshair is, and I choose where the crosshair is by clicking with my left mouse button. So that's another one. For other people whose 3 buttons is still far too much, of which, to be honest, I am now one of them, holding down the Alt on a PC or Option button on a Mac will allow you to do all of these 3 with the 3 buttons on your mouse. So Option left click will enable me to rotate around. Option right click will dolly into the area, and option middle click, because I've managed to find something that enables that on my magic mouse, allows me to pan around my scene. So that's really quickly how to move things around. So you'll notice that I'm really quite fast when I move things because I'm always using the Alt, and that's the way I move things around. There are multiple views in Cinema 4D, which is indicated by this fourth button here. This can also be accessed by the middle mouse click, but I shall use my first mouse click there. Oops. And you can see I now get my 4 views up that show my top view, my front view, and my right view. These are my orthographic views of my scene. And whatever I do in one is instantly happening on another. So they are live viewport things. It's really useful for positioning things and ensuring that stuff sits together or is in the right viewport or in the right orientation or is in actual fact in the right perspective. It's super helpful. If you want to enlarge any one of these, you can see that each of them has their own camera tools. So if I want the top view larger, I can click on that fourth icon again, and that will expand that fourth icon so that my top view is taking up in the entire window.
One quick question.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, just a couple of quick questions. Ryan's asked, how did you enable your middle click on your Magic Mouse?
I downloaded something called Magic Prefs. It's free, it's old, but it works. It will say this was stopped developing in 2012. We can't guarantee that it works, but just search for Magic Prefs and it allows you to have a middle click. And I'm on Big Sur and it still works, thank God. It's really useful. Because for some reason Apple just don't want us to have a middle mouse click anymore.
And also quickly, could you go back to your main perspective view and show again how you pulled up the 4 views?
Yes.
Really quick, thanks.
So up here in the top right hand corner of my viewport, so I've got my move, my pan, my dolly, my rotate, and then there is the 4th button which brings up the 4 views. This can also be done by middle mouse clicking in each of these windows. So if I middle mouse click whilst in this view, it brings up the 4, and then middle mouse clicking in any of the others will enlarge the one that I am hovering over at the time. This can also be done with the F keys on your keyboard. So F1 is perspective, F2 is top, 3 is right, 4 is front, F5 brings up the 4 views. Sorry. So it's a quite quick way of swapping between the views that you want to look at. Okay, anything else?
Just having a quick look. So Jacob normally uses a tablet and a pen. Are there any preferences to make using a pen easier? Or should C4D be used with just a mouse?
Yes, it can be. Depending on what you install and when you install it, there will be options available and you can configure the left click, right click and mouse click and things like that. I don't have one here to show you, or at least not plugged in at this particular point. If you do have a Mac, sorry, I'll start again. When you have a Mac, the options don't appear. If you have a PC, you will need to press a tick box under input devices that says enable graphics tablet, I think. It doesn't appear on the Mac ones because it just simply doesn't. But you will need to enable that on a Windows machine.
Cool. So we have a couple of other questions, if that's cool. Holly's asked, how do you snap the pivot to the corner of the cube? So you know when you rotate around the cube?
Yep, there's no snap as such, but when I hold down Alt and I left click to go around, I just make sure that that is where my mouse was when I hold down my left mouse button. Difficult to demonstrate mouse stuff when you can't see me, isn't it, really? So yeah, you can see that my mouse is there. I hold down Option, then I hold down left click, and that is where it pivots around. So it will always pivot around where my mouse cursor was. Hope that explains that one.
Cool. And another one, is there a shortcut? So this is about the 4 views again. Is there a shortcut for going back to the default view in each panel? As to maybe the S shortcut.
There's frame default, but there's no shortcut for it. So if I want to reset my view, I can go to view and frame default, but that would need to be done for each window because each window is separate, I think. Yeah, so if I did that and I do frame default here, it won't reset this one because each one can be different and configured depending on how you want it to be.
Thanks.
That's all right.
A couple of others. Can you modify the grid space and what options are available for snap to grid? What scale or units are we using? And can we set this up to make more accurate dimensional models?
Okay. The grid is a good question. I'm trying to think how that's done. If I go to Edit and Preferences, under Units, you can choose whether or not you are using centimeters, millimeters, and so on and so forth. So if I select my cube is 200 centimeters. That's generally what the default cube is created at. If I change that to millimeters, then of course it will show the appropriate, this is 2000 millimeters because the size of the cube hasn't changed, just the measurements in which I am working. The grid space basically changes depending on how far you zoom in. So I'm just trying to figure out what that's currently working at. So that's basically a 50 centimeter grid, but then you can get into there and it will just keep subdividing itself. Snapping to grid is done over here with the little magnet tool, and you enable snapping first, and then you go back to it, and then you can choose whether or not you want to snap to work plane grid or edges, polygons, axes, 3D, quantizing, guiding, whatever. So you turn it on first and then choose whether or not you're going to snap to grid or something else. And then I'm going to turn that off again. I think that's as much as I can answer with that one, really.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's everything for now. I can always do the others in the background as well. Thanks.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, Mark's just mentioned a good point. When I rotate around and I'm using my shortcuts, I can rotate around the object because I'm clicking on an object. If I don't have an object to click on, if I have my mouse somewhere over here, it will do it from the central point of the camera again, or it will rotate around a particular space. So it sort of picks a space to go around. Only if I select a particular point of an object will I be able to move around it. So thank you for that, Mark. Ooh. Okay, that's a useful one as well. If you find that you end up looking somewhere completely doolally and have no idea where you are, select your cube or object and you can press H or O and that will take you to your object. Or if you have discovered like it's completely upside down, view frame default will reset your entire view. Okay, so that's moving around, just conscious of time. Let's have a look at moving and objects and then working with some primitives. So we have 3 tools up here that are very useful: move, rotate, scale. You can see that if you hover over them, they will tell you what the shortcuts are. So for move is E, and you will get these axis handles as you would expect. If I click and hold in any blank space on my screen, I am moving my cube in all 3 axes, as you can see from my positions down here. If I hover over one of the axis handles, like the green one, until it turns white, I can click and hold and lock it into that particular axis, so it'll only move that way. If you look, my object actually has these corners as well. So this green corner, if I click and hold on that, that selects 2 axes, and I can move things around that way. So it is moving on the XZ plane, but not up in the Y one at all. Or if I choose the red one there, then it will work on the ZY plane, which is very useful for locking things out and stopping things from moving around. If you want to go to your rotate tool, funny enough, I have rotate. I can free rotate around here and it will move around the central point if I click a blank space. If I click a space inside the gizmo, I can sort of free rotate around that way. Or if I have a particular axis I want to lock it round, once again, I can hover over one until it goes white, and I am locking it only to rotate around that particular way. Really useful button up here, which is the reset transform, which will just put it all back to 0 again. And funnily enough, scale will scale this up and down. Now, I know you guys are going to want to grab one of these handles, grab the red handle and go, but it's still going up in all the directions, no matter which one of these I press. Yes, this is because of the type of object that this is. And this is one of the things that we're looking at today, which is a primitive object. Primitive because it is fairly primitive in what you can do with it. Also known as parametric because it is made up of its parameters. And the parameters of a cube that a computer needs to generate are a size in X, Y, and Z. I'm just going to reset my things back to centimeters because I prefer it. And that's what I have here. I have a size X, a size Y, and a size Z. So I can be more precise if I want to say that my object is 200 by 100 by 50. And I can be more mathematically correct this way than perhaps with the snapping and the size guiding we were talking about earlier. With my move scale or rotate tools selected, and as long as I am on model mode on the left hand side, which is this big cube one here, I have access to these little object handles, and they allow me to change the size of this object a bit more organically, shall we say, than if I was going to use the mathematicals numbers here. Depending on which objects you have selected will depend on how many little of these handles you've got. So a sphere, I can select it and I can, funnily enough, increase and decrease the size of the sphere, but I can't do much else with it. Again, it works on the size of a radius. So if I choose 45, then my diameter will, of course, be 90. It is very useful sometimes to look at the attributes manager when dealing with objects, because there may be some hidden features that can be enabled in the attributes manager. So with my cone selected, I have access to 2 little orange dots, or yellowy dots. They always used to be orange, now they're yellow. I can select the bottom one and I can increase and decrease the radius of the base of the cone. I can grab the top one and I can increase and decrease the height of my cone. If I look at my object manager, my attributes manager and the object tab, there is another area here that I can increase, and that's my top radius. And if I just click and drag on my little input area, so I can click and hold with my left mouse button and then I can drag my mouse up and down, I now have 3 dots that I can change. So I have the height of my truncated cone, the top radius, and the bottom radius. It's very useful for making truncated cones. I can even go to my caps tab and turn off caps, which means I can make a lampshade. Isn't that nice? So it's always useful to have a look in the Attributes Manager to see if there are things that you can do with your primitive objects that you may not necessarily have been aware of or are not as obvious without going into the Attributes Manager first. Okay, so they're primitives. There's quite a few of them. I'm not going to go through every single one. I'm going to let you guys have a chance to go away and play with that in your own time. But I've given you all of the knowledge I think you need, which is to have a look at the handles that you can use. Always make sure you're in object mode, and then have a look in the Attributes Manager for fun things that you can turn on and off to get different shapes without having to do too much work.
We have a couple of questions, if that's
Okay.
So how do you change the length of the axis handles? Because the dots are exactly over the other kind of axis handles.
Yes,
kind of
annoying,
hard
isn't it?
to get to. Yes, annoying. We know.
Welcome to Cinema 4D, and for some reason our ability of putting them right where they're always in the way. It is entirely based on the angle. I'll start that again. The axis handles are always the same size. It depends how close you are to the object. So zoom in or zoom out, or dolly in or dolly out, is probably the easiest way to gain access to those handles. It just so happens that the arbitrary number that they chose for the size of those handles is the same that they have for the arbitrary number of the size of the cube. You can always, if you want to, go to Filter in your viewport and turn off Axis, which is Alt-D or Option-D on a Mac. So Option or Alt-D will turn those on and off to allow you to get to those little axes handles without the actual axes being in the way.
And another, so Paul's had a great question slash statement. He
Ooh.
said, is there a way to scale to whole numbers? Say, for instance, holding down the shift key.
Ah, funnily enough, yes. And you do that by holding down the shift key. So,
one of my favorite shortcuts. Great suggestion.
That is, yeah. If I go for movement, you can see if I just move this up and down, it's just going at any integer, I suppose is the correct number. So I'm all over the shop with 255, 20, whatever. If I start to move and then hold shift, I can quantize that number to lock it so that it's in increments of 5. Oops. But you must press shift after you start to move because it is a tool modifier key. If I hold down shift and then move, it has nothing to modify, so it's not doing anything. So start to move and then hold shift and it will do it. And the same works for rotation and scale. Okay, next.
I think we're good to date.
Okay, cool, right. So let's have a look at changing the way or modifying our cube beyond our abilities at the moment. So file, new, let's create a cube. Hooray! I'm going to introduce you to these things now, which are called deformers. They exist over here in this sort of purpley blue box, indicated by a Bend Deformer. Now, if I just press that, it will create a Bend Deformer, which, funnily enough, is the one I'm about to show you. If you're interested in others, you can click and hold on this, and you can see that there is loads to choose from. Some more useful than others, some old and decrepit and need to be retired. But they're there and they can be played with. The first one I'm going to show you, though, of course, is the bend tool. Now, I'm going to show you some other things as well very quickly about hiding cubes. I'm going to turn off my cube and I'm going to press the green tick there, and that turns off my cube. It stops Cinema 4D from generating it. It still exists in my object manager, but it's no longer here for me to interact with, look at, or change. With my Bend Deformer, you can see that I have two pieces of information as well as my orange box. One is a strength and one is a direction. And funnily enough, if I look in the attributes manager of my object, you can see I have a strength and an angle. So if I increase the strength of my bend, there we go, we get something that looks like the bend icon did earlier, which is the Bend Deformer. Huzzah. And then you can choose your angle, and the angle is which way round that it actually goes. So at 0 degrees, of course, it's going that way, and then you can go all the way 360 degrees, all the way around. Okay, perfect. So let's just delete that and start again. Now I'm going to turn my cube on. Bing. How do I associate one with the other? Because at the moment I have two completely different objects and they don't interact. To do this, select the Bend Deformer and click and hold with the left mouse button, and then click and drag, and you can see that I get a little box. My icon changes for my mouse and it says, here is a box, and points that way. That says I'm going to reorder my object manager. That's it. That just reorders it. Doesn't do anything. It doesn't change association. That's not the one we want. So select your Bend Deformer, click and hold on it, and then hover over the cube until the arrow points down. If I hover below, points to the left, hover over, points down. This says this will make this object a child of the cube and therefore makes it part of the hierarchy. The cube is still its own object and I can change things and I can do things with it. So let's do something with the cube. With my cube selected, let's change my height to 600. And you can see that I now have a very tall cube and my Bend Deformer is halfway down. Perfect. Now, with my Bend Deformer selected, I'm going to increase my strength and watch what happens. Not exactly bending, is it? The reason for this, I'm just going to stick that at 90. The reason for this is my cube is currently made up of, funnily enough, 6 faces, the way you'd expect it. But those 6 faces are only made up of 6 single segments. Cinema 4D, like most 3D applications, does not know how to bend a single flat surface. So what we need to do is increase the number of segments that make up my cube. Now, to demonstrate this a bit more, I'm going to change some settings in my viewport. I'm going to go to Display, and I'm going to choose Ground Shading in brackets Lines. The shortcut for that is N and then B. So you could press N. Don't try and move your mouse, because if you move your mouse, the shortcut thing will disappear. This is a shortcut menu. So N and then B on your keyboard, and you can see that I've got these little black lines now all around my cube. Now watch what happens. I will now select my cube, and under my segments for Y, I'm just going to simply click the up arrow once. And now I have 2. So I have 2 segments, as you can see. My line goes all the way across. If I just turn off my Bend Deformer with the green tick, you can see that my cube now has 2 segments up. Still only 1 across, still only 1 that way, 2 up. Funnily enough, if I press 3, huzzah, look, I have 3. Let's turn on my Bend Deformer and see what it does now. I now have a Bend Deformer that bends in 3 different segments. It's starting to look a little bit like I want it to, but nowhere near as much. So I'm going to click and drag on my top arrow and go whoop, and just make loads. And now you see I've got an awful lot of them, but I do have the ability of now moving my Bend Deformer around and it actually looking like the cube is bending. Let's turn off Ground Shading Lines by going NA. And you can see that I no longer have the visible lines, which is good. And my cube looks nice and well bent there. You can choose where the Bend Deformer goes, because my Bend Deformer also has its own axes. So if I select the Bend Deformer and grab the green handle, I can move it up. So I can choose where the bend occurs on the object that it is deforming. Okay, it's hours of fun doing that, I'm not going to lie. There are loads of settings to do with deformers. Again, we don't have a great deal of time, but one of the biggest ones is mode here under the thing for under the attributes manager for the Bend Deformer, I can choose unlimited as well, which will continue that bend even though it is outside of the Bend Deformer. So this time it will continue to do the curvature, but it won't necessarily matter if it is in or outside of that Bend Deformer. For the moment, however, I'm just going to stick to limited. And then I'm going to turn it off. Gone. Okay, good. So I'm going to show you another deformer quickly, and that is the Twist Deformer. And you can see that once again, I've got a little orange dot. I've got an orange block that says it's going to twist that way. And in order to associate one with the other, I will click and drag the twist into the cube. And now I will grab my little orange dot and I will twist. And you can see my cube twists around. Perfect. This is quite a nice one that if I want to carry on without having to twizzle all the way around, change my mode from limited to unlimited, and that twist continues all the way up, which is really nice. Which, to be honest, to have modelled any other way would have been a bit of a pain. But the one thing I really like about deformers is you can stack them. As you can see, I've got two deformers in this object, and if I just turn one on, turn my bend back on, I now have a twisted cube that bends. If I had them in a different order, I would get a very different and slightly unpleasant result, because it bends the stuff first and then twists it. So it does it in order that they have been put. So because it bends that and then tries to twist what's in the twist box, it goes a little bit nasty. So just be aware that the order in which you put these things can result in a slightly different shape. And now what I want to do, just to introduce you to something else, which is the traffic light system for visibility. I want my deformers to remain in effect. If I untick them, they stop working, but I want to hide the purple boxes. So next to my tick are these two grey dots. If I click the first one, the top one of twist, it goes green. If I click it again, it goes red. And I'm going to do the same to the bend one, and that just removes them from my viewport. It doesn't stop them being there. I can click on them and I can increase the twist still, or I can move the bend if I select them individually. But the moment I let go, they disappear again and I'm just left with my shape. So that very quickly is an introduction to primitives and deformers. Have we got any questions, Elly?
We have a couple, yes. So this was a little bit earlier. Oh. How do you change the orientation of the axis? So top view, y-axis up and down, X will be left to right, Z is towards you. Or in other words, Z will be the height axis up and down from the ground plane. So is there a way to adjust that?
Good question. I don't think so.
Okay. That's cool. That's cool.
Is my short answer. I know we can rearrange the rotations because at the moment it's H, P, and B, which for people, if you want to know what that means, it's heading, pitch, and bank. Think about an aeroplane. Which way is it heading? Which way is it pitching? Which way is it banking? And you can change those into different orders or turn them into X, Y, and Z. But I don't think we can change which way is X, Y, and Z in the coordinates system. That I am aware of. No, something I've never done, so, or needed to.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's not a problem. So Jonathan's asking, can you record deformations live? And then he goes on to say, in the way that you can in After Effects Motion Sketch. I'm not familiar with that.
No, neither am I. You can record them, but live, I'm not sure, although we do still have cappuccino.
Noseman has just dropped that in the chat.
Oh, has he? What, cappuccino? Oh, brilliant. Yeah. So in theory, I could start real time. Oh, did I actually press that button? Oh, that did not do anything for me at all when it came to deformers. We'll have to get back to you on that one. Let's liaise with Noseman and see what he says. I thought that would have done that, if I'm honest.
Noseman says it only records PSR, position, scale, and
Oh,
rotation.
only position, scale, and rotation. So that's a shame. So yeah, Cappuccino, I wasn't sure. Yeah, it doesn't work. So sadly not. No, you can't record deformations live, but you can still keyframe them. Okay.
Cool. Yeah. One other quick one. So, sorry, Deanna or Diana. Sorry if I'm saying any names wrong. Is trying the twist, but she's not seeing any changes. So, could you quickly run through how you'd set up the twist again from scratch, just in case?
Yep.
It's,
Okay. So what we do, we create the Twist Deformer, and you must make sure that you click and drag the Twist Deformer into the cube. So the parent with the little plus and minus should always be the cube, and then the twists and deformers are children of that. And then you can select the Twist Deformer, grab one of the points, and you will see the deformation.
Perfect. Thanks. So hopefully it's working now.
Sweet.
Cool. Yeah. Cool. I think there's a couple of other questions. So Marilyn's saying that the bend doesn't apply to the cube. Make sure the deformer is a child of your cube. And Valentina is saying, does any deformer should work as long as it's a child of the object?
That's it. Exactly. I mean, some may require different things like collision and surface stuff, or spline wrap. They may require you to do other things, but if you want to know how they work, select the spline, create one, right click, show help, and learn how to do it with our lovely little help tool, which will show you about all of the different deformers and how they work.
Perfect. Cool. Yeah. Any other questions, like drop them in. I'm sure Matt can answer those in the background, or we can get to those for the rest of this next hour.
Yeah, so I will hand this over to you.
Sounds good to me.
There we go. All yours.
Thank you very much. Can everyone see my screen?
We can now.
Yeah, perfect. Cool. So thanks for that, Matt. That was so much information, and it's super great, and so many questions as well, which we love. It makes it really. Oh, where am I going with this? Okay, cool. So we're going to be taking all of that information that Matt's just shown us, and we're going to be creating our little robot guy here using only primitives and deformers. So let's get into it. So this is, if you want to follow along, we're going to be doing this entirely from scratch. So by all means, follow along, ask me to stop, go slower, repeat myself. That's totally cool. So I'm just going to grab a whole new scene, and we're going to build this from scratch, and we're going to go kind of like top to bottom. So we're going to start with our lovely robot's head, and we're going to do that with a cube. So I'm just going to grab a standard cube, and I'm going to leave the sizes kind of as they are. So I'm going to leave this 200 by 200 by 200. Let me just move this a little bit out of the way so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, cool. Right, so on the original robot, we have like this rounding going on. We have this beveled edge, and we can do that by using this fillet option. So if we sort of just check that on, we can see we get this little bit of rounding, which is nice, but it's not enough because we've only got a 3 centimeter radius at the moment. So we can kind of, you can bump this up to whatever we want. Let's do something like, let's do maybe 30. And so we get this nice rounded sort of kind of head going on. But the trouble is we've only got 3 subdivisions. So it's trying to kind of like do this 30 centimeter radius, but with only 3 subdivisions. So it's definitely not enough. So let's kind of, I don't know, maybe try 10. maybe a little bit more, could try 20. No, so 10 was fine. Cool, so we have the start of our robot head. And now let's grab our first deformer, because we're going to sort of make it look like it's sort of shrinking when it comes to the back. So if we grab our deformers, let's have a look. So let's grab a taper. And so as we know, we need to make sure our deformer is a child of the object that we want to deform. So I'm going to grab my taper, I'm going to make it a child of my cube. And if we sort of mess with the strength a little bit, we can see that it's starting to work. However, it's kind of the wrong way around. So we just need to rotate our taper. So if I hit my R key, or we can come up and grab our rotate tool at the top, we get our axis bands. And I'm going to use that wonderful shortcut that Matt showed us. So I'm going to click my red axis band. I'm then going to hit my shift key, and I'm just going to rotate it, and it's going to do it in increments of 5 degrees. So it's now minus 90 degrees, which is great. We could have done that in our coordinates manager here. We could have hit minus 90 and just pressed enter, and it would have done it. Or we can go into our taper, into our coordinates, and do the same thing here. So what's nice in Cinema 4D, there's so many different ways of doing the same thing. So whatever suits you, you can do it. Cool, so let's have a quick look at my taper. So let's increase this strength a little bit more, so we have a bit more of like a tapered shape for our head. And that's looking good. This is our starting point. So we have the head. Now let's work on the ears. Let's use a whole bunch of different primitives, all within Cinema 4D, and make some really funky looking robot ears. So let's see what we've got in here. So let's grab a tube, and it's kind of the wrong way around. It's the wrong orientation. And so we can adjust our orientation in here if we want to, or again, you know, we can grab our rotation axis band and our shift key and just go this to 90 degrees. Cool. Let's pull that out. So at the moment, it's got a massive ear. Let's make it a little bit smaller, so you know it looks a little bit more in proportion to how it should be. Let's put in a couple of settings in here, maybe like 30 and maybe like 35. Oh, now it's like super long as well. Let's go, what should we do? 20. Let's go a little bit higher. 25. Cool. So there we go. Now we're just going to grab our axis handle just to move it, and we're just going to move it into our head. So if we come closer, we can see at the moment it's looking a little bit kind of jagged, so it's not like a nice smooth tube, which is something that we want. And that is because of our rotation segments. So because we have 16 rotation segments, it has, if we go into our lines, it's trying to create this smooth tube, but only with 16 rotation segments. So it's not quite able to kind of make that as smooth as possible. So we can just increase this number. So I just doubled it to 32, and now we have this nice, slightly smoother tube. And it doesn't need to be perfect, because I'm going to be, let's say we're going to be looking at this from this distance, and so from here we can get away with only having 32 rotation segments. But if you know, if I was like super close, you might have to like increase those a little bit more. Right then, let's work on the next bit. Let's grab another object. Let's grab another primitive. Let's grab something I haven't used often, this oil tank. And again, I'm just going to rotate this round, and we're going to make it smaller. So I know the inner radius of my tube, my original tube, was 30. So I need to make sure this is smaller than that. So let's do like 25. And then we do a height of about 45. And so it's looking kind of weird at the moment. It's looking kind of like a sphere, but two like hemispheres sort of put together. And that's because our cap height is quite big. It's 22.5, and we've only got like a height of 45. And so we need to kind of make this a little bit smaller so we get that kind of oil tank shape back. So let's put a value of maybe 7. And now we're kind of getting that shape back. Now let's just move this back in here. Just sort of slightly sticks out. And then again, you know, we might want to increase our rotation segments in our oil tank just so we get that nice smooth rounding. Cool. So a couple more bits. Let's get a cylinder because we're going to make this antenna with a little kind of like sphere on top. And we're going to do that with a cylinder and a sphere. So let me just make this a lot thinner and a lot smaller. Cool. I'm just going to position all of this by eye for now, just to how I kind of like it. Move that over a little. Cool. So I'm using, as Matt showed, I'm using my 1, 2, and 3 shortcuts. I don't often kind of use these. I find it just a lot kind of faster to work with 1, 2, and 3, and then I use my mouse button to move around. But that's just personal preference, really. Okay, cool. So now we're going to get a sphere and we're going to plonk it on top of this cylinder, and it's going to be our antenna. And we can do that with a little trick to position it in the right place. So if I grab my sphere, I'm going to just move it over here, and I'm going to make it 5 centimeters. That might be a bit too big. So we could try and position this by eye. You know, we could come up into our 4 views and we could be like, okay, like let's see how we do this. We can do that. That's not a problem. Or a little trick. We can make a sphere a child of our cylinder, and then if we go into our sphere position coordinates, we can actually zero these out, and what it's going to do, it's going to go into the kind of 0 position of our cylinder, and so it's now kind of like dead center of our cylinder, and then all we need to do is drag it up so it's on top. So perfect. So instead of having to like eyeball it, we can do that little trick there, and I'm going to do that a couple of times with a couple of different things whilst we make the robot. Okay, so we've got our ear. So we've got our head, we've got our ear. Now let's just duplicate our ear and then throw it over to the other side. So I'm going to grab all the elements, all the 4 elements in my ear. So I'm going to click my sphere, I'm going to hold my shift key, and I'm going to click my last element, which is my tube. And I'm going to just hold I'm on a Mac, hold my command key, and I'm going to click and drag and let go. And it's going to have duplicated all of those elements that I had selected. And now we can just pull this over here, hit my R key, and then we're going to swing it all the way around. So it's minus 180. And now I can come back into my front view. And I'm just going to position it roughly, you know, roughly where the other one is. Let me do this there. There we go. Right. So we are getting somewhere. So we're getting somewhere with the head. We've got our head, we've got our ears, and now let's create our little robot face. So we have these little eyes. There's my little thing. There we go. So we've got these little eyes here and we've got this little mouth. So we're going to make those bits now. And then that part is done. So let me get a cylinder. And I'm going to just sort of pull it out just so I can kind of see what I'm doing, because I'll position it once it's in its right kind of shape and size.
We have a quick question.
Oh, yeah.
That might be good. I think now would be a good one. Is there a way to group shapes into a folder?
Oh, you're ahead of me.
Sorry.
You've read my mind. You've read my mind. Yes, there is. So, okay, what we can do. So let's group our head and our ears together, and then we can group our face as a separate thing. So I'm going to ignore my this cylinder for now. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to get rid of it. I'm just going to get rid of that. We don't need that. We'll remake that in a sec. Okay, cool. So let's group our head and our ears, so our entire robot kind of head. So I'm going to grab all of my elements, or all the elements that I want to group together. So let's say I had the whole bunch others, but I only want to group these together. I'm going to grab them all. And there's a couple of ways we can do this. So the first way, the shortcut way, which is the way I like, is pressing Option and G. And what's going to do, you can see everything is now hidden inside this null. And this is kind of like grouping like Photoshop layers. So we can drop down our null, and inside is all of our elements that we just chose to group. Let me pull these out. Let me pull them all out. Let me get rid of my null. The other way of doing that is we can just grab our null from up here. And then, we can just grab everything and we can just drop it into there if we wanted to. So that is a super handy way of grouping things. And then we could just double click this and we can go head. So this is our robot head.
Could you just show how to duplicate something again, please?
Yeah, sure. So if I have my sphere selected, let's say I want to duplicate my sphere, I'm going to hit my command key. I'm going to click my sphere and I've got both pressed down still, and I'm going to pull it down, and we can see we've got this arrow and a plus. And as soon as I let go, and then I let go, so I let go of my mouse first, then I let go of command, and I've duplicated my object or my sphere. And we can do it with multiple objects. It doesn't just need to be one.
On a PC, that's hold down control. And actually, it also works on a Mac as well. So you can hold down control on a Mac to duplicate as well. Equally, the same thing as you'd expect in any other program. Control C, Control V will allow you to copy and paste entire objects as well.
Yeah, so I can just do that as well. Okay, cool. So let's, oh yeah, is there more?
One more, which I've answered, but is there a kind of duplication tool like mirroring? I don't know if you're going to get to that in a bit.
Ah, that's next week.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah, can do. As I say.
Yeah. I thought that was going to be one of our little things for little bits for next week.
True. Yes.
Yeah.
But yes, there is. There's a symmetry object of which we will go through in more detail next week.
So yes, you can. But yeah, I thought we'd save that for next week when we get into like all things modeling.
Okay.
But yeah, it would be super handy for the robot too, though, because there are a few things we're going to be duplicating, like our arms and our legs.
We could drop it in this one. There's no reason why not, because we'll use it slightly differently next week.
Okay. Maybe I will. We'll see. No,
The suspense.
Okay, cool. Right, so let's get back to robot's face. So we get this nice smiling robot with those nice happy eyes. So I'm going to grab my cylinder. I'm just going to rotate this 90 degrees again, and then we're going to make it a bit smaller. Let's make it 20 centimeters, and we're going to make it really, really small, so about 1 centimeter in our height. What's so cool about the cylinder is we have this slice option. So we can actually just click this slice and it's going to slice our cylinder. And so we can adjust our from and our to angles to kind of perfect this. And for me, it works perfectly to get these, these cute little half cylinder eyes, these little half moon eyes. So let me go into my 4 views again so I can position this where I want it. So let me go a bit closer. I'm going to press S to kind of focus in on the object that I have selected. And I'm going to move it right onto my robot face. Cool, so we've got a bit of a Cyclops thing going on at the moment. So if that's what you want, we can have a Cyclops. We can have a Cyclops robot. It's our robot. It's 3D. We can make what we want. But I'm going to duplicate my cylinder. So I did my command click for that one. And on this first one, I'm going to just sort of move it over, and let's go -35. And I'm going to hit enter to make sure it kind of locks that in. And then because I did a -35, I now know I can do a plus or positive 35 for this eye, and it's going to be like perfectly in the middle. Cool. And the only other thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to grab them both. So, if you grab the top one, then shift click, it will grab the next one. I'm just going to move it down slightly. There we go. So we've got our little eyes going on. Cool, so the final thing of this is we're going to grab a cylinder, or a capsule actually, and then a Bend Deformer to make our nice smiley little mouth. Because it's going to be a happy robot. He's not going to be a sad robot. So let's grab a capsule. Again, just so I can see it, I'm going to move it out. I'm going to rotate again.
A very big smile.
This is my smile today.
This is the smile of a Maxon trainer.
Here we go, and we are finished. Okay, cool. So let me make this a little bit smaller. Let me go into my capsule attributes, and we're going to do a radius of like 3, and what should we do? Maybe 40. There's a little mouth here. Cool. And now we're going to grab a Bend Deformer. So let's grab our Bend Deformer. We're going to make it a child of our capsule by clicking, dragging, and then letting go. And then we're going to use this lovely little fit to parent option, which I love and overuse. So I'm going to hit that fit to parent, and then we're going to just sort of adjust our strength a little bit to get our kind of smiley mouth going on. Let's maybe do -60. And it's looking a little bit kind of skew with at the moment. So we're going to need to like rotate this a little bit just so it kind of doesn't quite look like he's kind of smiling like this. Smirking. Unless that's what we want to go for, then hey, we can. So when it comes to rotating this, we want to make sure we have our capsule selected, not our bend. Because if I rotate my bend, we're going to start to get some kind of weird stuff going on because we're rotating our bend and not our kind of our parent object, which is our capsule. So we grab our capsule and then we rotate. It's all going to kind of work together, and our bend's going to kind of work and rotate at the same time. Now we just need to move this back, and then we can just position this. So if we grab this blue kind of axis handle here, we can actually just move it on just the 2 axis here, which is super handy. And then one final thing, at the moment, again, we don't really have enough segments. So let me just increase my height segments to 12. So we get that nice smooth bend going on. There we go. So now look, we've got our lovely, is it Bob Ross, happy little robot?
Happy robot.
Happy robot. We've got a happy little robot. All right, cool. So we've got our face. So again, we can come in and we can grab our elements for our face, and we can Option G, and we're going to group them, and then we can just go face. And if we want to, we can just drop that inside of our head null. So it's all kind of like on the same part. Right, cool. So let's take a quick look at this again. So we've made our face, we've got our head, and we've got our ears. So we've done kind of like that, the top third of our little robot guy. Now let's look at creating the body, and then we're going to make our kind of robot arms. Being very handsy today as I'm explaining what I'm doing.
It's a good job we've got the cameras on this time, because at one point I was describing polygons and I thought, is my camera still on? So
I kind of forget.
am I just directing to nobody?
Okay, cool. So right, let's have a look. So yeah, I used a cylinder to create this body. And let's just sort of rotate this 90 degrees, and then let's make it a little bit bigger on our radius, but then maybe a little bit smaller on our height. Cool, right, here we go. And then again, we're going to come into this caps, and we're going to create some smoothing like we did on our robot head. So if I switch the fillet on, and we're going to increase our radius by maybe quite a bit. Maybe 35? Let's go 35. Cool, so we have this nice rounding, and it's nice using the cylinder because we have this kind of like slightly flat area here, and this is where we're going to add sort of like the shoulder of our arm. And so it's nice that we kind of have been able to create that by using a cylinder and a fillet. Again, as we are loving to do today, we're going to increase our rotation segments just by a little bit. So they're now 32. So we get that nice smoother sort of subdivision going on for that rounding. And then we're going to grab another taper. So we're going to grab a taper deformer, and we're going to make that a child of our cylinder. And we're going to fit to parent again. And let's just see what's going on. Okay, cool. So it's doing it, but rotation's wrong. So with our taper selected, I'm going to hit my R key, and I'm just going to rotate it, holding shift, by 90 degrees. So we now have the start of our kind of robot body going on. And what I ended up doing, I ended up making sort of like a bit of like a chest sort of area. And all I did was duplicated the original body, made it a little bit. Yeah.
Sorry, can you just show the attributes of the cylinder again of what you've just done with the body?
Yeah. So,
and for those who are asking, you will be able to watch this again later. You can reuse the link that you used to join this webinar, and it should take you to the recording.
So yeah, so my original cylinder was a radius of 65 and a height of 135, and then we got that nice rounding by turning on that fillet, and then we did a radius of 35 on there, and then we used a taper deformer to create this kind of tapered shape. And now what I've done, I've duplicated that exact same setup. So I've got my same cylinder and taper, but I'm just going to make the radius a little bit bigger and my height a little bit smaller. So we now get this kind of like, I don't know, like superhero chest. We'll need to get a little S on there now. So now we have our body. Right, so let me just pull this up slightly so it's a little bit closer so we don't have to have like a super long neck. And then let's make our neck. So grab my cylinder and I'm just going to make it 15 by 15 and I'm just going to position it just down in here. Cool. Right, so let me group all these together. Option G, and this is our body. Right. So we are, you know what, actually, I'm not too sure about the taper. I think it's a bit too strong. So I'm gonna half that. There we go, that's looking a little bit less pointed. Cool.
Proper
right.
Triangular superhero chest that was, wasn't it?
Yes, that was a bit too extreme. Right, cool. Let's create our arms. And so we're going to start off with a sort of creating a shoulder. And we're going to do that by grabbing a torus. I'm just going to sort of pull this down. We're going to rotate it 90 degrees again. And then we can sort of change our pipe radius to something like 6. So our ring radius to something like 6. And our pipe to maybe, okay, so ring to 10, pipe to 6.
We've got a question.
Yes.
Can we show how to do Boolean additions to combine the model meshes? Now, yes, we can. My question at this point is, for those people who don't know what that is, there is a generator, a shape generator inside Cinema 4D that will allow you to combine two objects, like we've got the two bits of the chest, to create a single meshed entity. Now we can do that, and we can use the Boolean to do that. The thing is that we don't need to at this point, because the mesh is going to be clipping. It doesn't really matter, and the materials that we will eventually put on are going to be the same or maybe different. So we could have the chest being a different color to the shouldery parts. We don't want to combine it. There we go, there it is. So the black part we want to remain separate. So whilst we can show how to do Booleans, we aren't planning on doing so at this point. Sorry, and carry on.
Cool, right, so back to our robot dude. So we've got our torus, which is going to be the starting of our kind of shoulder. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to eyeball all this stuff. So I'm just going to rotate this a little bit just so it matches kind of the angle of my robot body. I'm just going to move that a little bit in there. Cool, right. Part 1 done. Now I'm going to grab a sphere, which is going to work a bit like the kind of the socket. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller, maybe like 10. And then we're going to use that same trick by making the sphere a child of our torus and then zeroing out our position. So it's now right in the middle of our torus. And so we have our shoulder and our kind of shoulder joint socket going on. So now we just need the top part of our arm. And we can do that with a cylinder and then another Bend Deformer. So let me just position this a little bit down here. And then let's make this a bit smaller. And let's go maybe 60. So this is going to be the top part of our arm, maybe even a bit smaller, maybe 40. And we're going to grab our Bend Deformer, make it a child of our cylinder, and we're going to use that fit to parent. And then if we just sort of rotate, if we just drop this strength to a minus value, and then we can reposition this. So make sure again you've clicked on your cylinder so you're not repositioning the bend. And then we can just pull this up and move this in. And so now we have the top of our arm. Cool. So we're getting there, we're getting closer. Now I'm going to, let me just pull that sphere out of that torus because you don't need that in there anymore. But I'm going to grab my torus and my sphere and I'm going to duplicate it again. So let me duplicate this. So I'm holding Command, clicking and dragging. So now I have these here. So my torus, we don't want any rotation because I'm going to position it at the bottom here and it's going to work as like our robot's elbow. So grabbing both my sphere and torus because I want to move both of them together. I'm just going to position this up in here. So we now have our elbow. So what's really nice about these like primitive objects is when we're creating these things, we can just duplicate things and we can reuse things. And when it comes to creating the legs in a sec, we kind of basically steal half the arm to recreate it. So you don't have to worry about kind of modeling every single thing or creating everything again from scratch. We can kind of just
3D is in some people call it cheating. I call it efficiency. If you don't need to model it again, don't model it again. We do have a question.
Yeah.
How do you reposition the center pivot point of the object, i.e. so that the arm moves around the shoulder rather than the elbow, or rather the center of the object?
Okay, so we can do that by changing where the axis is. So let me grab a cube. Let me just do this like separately away from this. So, right. So our axis is in the center of our cube. So, you know, when I do my rotation, it rotates from this axis point. So if I rotate around here, it's rotating from our axis. Cool, super handy. But what if we want it to rotate, like you said, around a different kind of part, like maybe to the side?
Like a door would rotate around the side of the cube rather than the middle.
Yeah, so we can click this enable axis and now this is gone, this is highlighted blue. So now what's happening, and we can also see we've got this little kind of cube in here. And what this means, now I can move, is it not, it needs to be editable.
There's the thing. So right, a primitive object is being calculated by the computer. That's why we call it a primitive one. So it is only using a very small amount of information, which is the center point and then its height, width and depth. It generates around the center. So for a primitive or parametric object, you cannot move the center point because it is being generated around that. If you wish to, there are a few little ways that we can do it. If you do not want to make the object editable, you could make it the child of a null and position that. Or in this instance, with the robots, we could make the cube the child of the sphere, which is where the joint is, and then you'd rotate the sphere to act as a pivot point. Or, as Elly is about to show, you can modify the object to no longer be primitive so that you can move the central point.
Cool, yeah, so what we can do, we can either hit our C key or this lovely button up in the top left, which makes our cube or our object editable. So converts it from a parametric to a polygonal object. So let's hit that. And then now, because our enable axis is on, we can move this axis. So let me say I move it over here, switch it off, and now when I rotate, it's rotating around that new axis. So yes, that is how you do it.
In general, we won't be looking at doing that for the robot at the moment, but as that crops up, it seemed like a good time to do it.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, but with the robot, we want to keep everything parametric. We want to use our primitive objects and our deformers only. But yeah, it is definitely possible. Just make it editable. Right, okay, cool. So where are we at? So forearm. Let's grab a cylinder. Let's position this kind of a little bit down here, a bit. And then let's make it a bit smaller. So maybe do a radius of like 25, maybe a little bit smaller, 15 by 40. Let's pull that up. Okay, cool. So now I'm just going to drop that and make it a child of my torus, just so I can position this in the center. So I've only done the X axis position, and then I'm just going to adjust the Y using the axis handles. Pull that back out. And let's grab another deformer, one that we haven't looked at yet, and that is the bulge deformer. And so if I drop that, make it a child of my cylinder, and we're going to fit to parent again. And then we can now, so we can do a minus strength, and so it's going to kind of like get sucked in. And then we can do a positive that creates this really cool like bulge. And I like that, but you know what? I might make this a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to need to make sure I fit to parent again. And then just move my cylinder down slightly. Cool, right, so we're getting there, Now let's duplicate the cylinder again, delete the bulge, because this now is in the exact same position as the kind of like forearm cylinder. We can create our hand using this duplicated cylinder. If I just move it down, let's just make it a bit smaller, maybe a bit smaller than that. And now we can just position this by eye onto here. And this is going to be the start of our hand. I'm then going to duplicate it again, make it smaller again, and just sort of, this is all just, you know, all just by eye. And then, you know what I might do? I might highlight both. And in my caps, I'm going to switch on a bit of like fillet again, and a bit just like maybe like a 0.5. So we get this nice sort of this smooth edge. We don't have to go too crazy with it. And now we'll get some little fingers. Radius of 1.5, and then maybe a height of 7. And then position that down. And then all I'm going to do, I'm going to come to my top view, press S to get close up on it, and then I'm just going to command, click and drag to create some copies of his little robot fingers.
Tiny.
There we go. Right, okay, cool. So that's arm done. So we're going to group it all, and we're going to call it the left arm. And then we're absolutely not going to redo the right arm. We're just going to duplicate our left arm.
Absolutely.
And reposition.
Copy pasta.
Right, so 180. And then let's just pull this all the way over. And then my little front view, just so we can sort of position this by eye. And there we go. Yeah.
I've got a good question for you.
Ooh, go on.
Do you prefer to name objects when you're finished modeling, or is it better to name as you go? Okay,
so I'm going to be honest with you all. I am the worst organised person when it comes to working in Cinema 4D. Nothing is ever named. please don't tell anyone that I do this. I organize things when I do a training session or when I share project files. And what I do is I name them afterwards, but that's only because, as I said, I don't actually name anything. Please don't judge me. I'm sorry. So Matt, what about you? Matt, you're more of like the pro modeler. So yeah. What's your professional opinion?
I would recommend naming as you go, because it's far easier to know what you're doing. I mean, at this particular point, because what we're doing, we're naming the things that we need to. You know, if we were going to look into this robot deeper and we really wanted to know which bit was what, we could label fingers, arm, wrists, shoulders, shoulder joint, if we wanted to. But we don't need to for this particular project. If I was going to do this because I then needed to animate it later, I would absolutely name things as I go, because I get very confused. Certainly if you end up with really big scenes and people build scenes and robots and you never label anything, you've got cube, and you're trying to figure out which one is the floor and which one is the robot's head. So name as you go.
Also handy if you're sharing files like in a studio, so they don't have to be like, what's cube point 100 for?
What's cube 1? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I should really get better at it, to be honest. Maybe one day. Right, cool. Let's take a quick look at our little reference image again. Let's work on this guy's little waist we've got going on here. So let's get a cube. I'm just going to pull this down so it's near-ish to where it needs to be. And let's go 20 by 15 by 20. Maybe by 25. There we go, that looks a bit better. Cool, if we come in here, we are going to grab another different former, a Twist Deformer. So we're going to make it a child of our cube again, and the lovely old fit to parent, and we're going to do the angle, and oh wait, it looks kind of weird. And this is down to the segments, just like Matt was showing us earlier. We need to make sure we have enough segments in our cube or in the object that we're twisting, because it can't twist this one single polygon. Otherwise, it's going to look a little bit like this, which isn't really what we're hoping for. So let's just increase our segments, and we can even, put our lines on so we can see. We get like a nice smooth. Let's go to 12. We get a nice smooth kind of twist going on. And let me just increase this to 180 and make sure it's still all good. Yeah, that's okay. We're going to be quite far away, so we'll get away with that. And then I'm going to duplicate my cube, take off my twist, and then we're going to change this to something like 5 centimeters. I'm just going to drop this on top, and then we're going to duplicate another, drop it on the bottom, and then let's just grab all of these elements and then move them up. So we have our waist, our super skinny twisted waist for our robot. This poor guy. Right, okay, and let's grab some same elements that we've already made to create our hips. So I'm going to grab this sort of like forearm cylinder and bulge, and I'm just going to rotate it and use it as the hips. So I'm going to click Command and drag that up, and then we can just position this like that. And I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. So maybe a radius of 10, and then maybe a height of like 40. And then our bulge, we can fit to parent again, and maybe we can, move that down. Well, actually, no, it looked all right with 20, didn't it? It looked okay. And let's move this back up. Also, we got our little guy's waist and his hips. So now we're going to grab 2 cylinders and put them either side, and they're going to work as like our sort of like our hip sockets that our legs are going to come into. So we're nearly there. Really, we're almost done with this guy. So let me grab a sphere.
Super quick interruption.
Yes.
Can you just show where the lock unlock button is on the attributes panel? in the bottom right. So
you mean
on the attributes panel, you've got mode, edit, user data. If you travel along to the right hand side, you've got the lock, unlock, and the one to the right of it, which I can't remember what that one is either.
So we have
To the right of it, the information stay. So someone has got, I think this is for Matthew. I think you may have your attributes panel locked there.
okay.
So if you just unlock, just make sure it is unlocked, you should be able to see the attributes of whatever you have selected and not it having pop up in another window. Sorry, thank you.
Cool. Sorry, I was kind of like thinking, I was trying to like get in your mindset. And
Yeah,
I was like,
sorry, totally halted you there.
Okay, cool. Right, so let's just make this maybe a little bit smaller. And I'm going to make it a child of my cylinder, just so I can position this in the right place. And I'm going to pull it out. And then we kind of go over. Right, let's come in here. So actually, you know what? Maybe we need to go a little bit smaller. Yeah, there we go. And then I'm just going to duplicate that over. And now we have our waist and our hips. Let me just grab all of these again. Option G, so we group it, and I'm going to name it because that's what I always do, right?
Of course.
Duh. Waist/hips. Right, final part, the legs, and then this little dude's done. So I'm going to grab a cylinder again. I'm going to make this leg in the similar way as I did the top of the arm. And we're going to steal a whole bunch of the elements from the arm, which is going to be, you know, super handy. So we don't have to remake all this stuff again. So there we go. That is the first part. I'm going to grab another Bend Deformer, make it a child of our cylinder, fit to parent, and then let's see, let's go -90. And what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to move the bend this time. So this isn't going to be an accident. I'm deliberately moving the bend. I'm going to move it up. So we have this nice kind of like bend, then it goes back into the straight cylinder. And so we can do that by just kind of moving the bend and repositioning it up slightly. And now I can grab my cylinder and I can move this up. And then maybe, you know what, maybe we want to go a little bit thinner. So a little bit, got a bit of skinny legs going on. This guy hasn't been to the gym, so right. Height
Never
segment.
skip leg day.
Never skip leg day, Mr. Robot Guy. Right, okay, cool. So he's got his nice little bendy leg, which goes into his straight part. And now I'm going to steal all these bits here because it's got like, originally I modeled him with feet, and then I thought, you know what, he's a robot. He's gonna have rocket feet, because I mean, if I was a robot, I'd have rocket feet too. So let me go into my left arm, and what am I going to grab? I'm going to grab all of these bits. So my torus, my sphere, and my cylinder. Cool. Command click and drag, and then we've got all of these parts here. And let me just going to position this by eye. But, you know, we could do that, make it a child and zero out the position and do it like that, but by eye works just fine. Cool, so the only other bit is we're going to add a tube at the bottom, and this is going to be sort of the bit that, you know, like the rocket fire would come out. Grab a tube, I'm going to make it a child of my cylinder, zero out my position, and we're going to make it a lot smaller. So let's go 10 by 15, and then a height of 5. So these are all just sort of random parameters-ish that worked when I was first creating this guy. So, you know, you can change these around if you're following along or making it from scratch. You can make your robot look totally different. It doesn't have to look like this. Move that in there. So yeah, that's where, you know, our rocket fuel is going to come out. Our pretend rocket fuel. Going to increase my rotation segments just one more time, just so we have that nice smooth rounding. And you know what? I'm just going to maybe put that on 10. Okay, cool. So we are so close to being finished. Now what we're going to do, you know what, actually I'm going to increase my height segments on this cylinder here, and I might do the same on there later on. I'm just going to increase that to 12, just so, because we've got the bulge going on, it was looking a little bit like rigid because it only had 4 height segments, so it was looking a little bit not as smooth as you know, would perhaps want it to look. So now, one final look at our guy. He's got these really cool rocket fins, and we can create these really easily using 2 different deformers on a cube. So the last time, let's grab our last primitive, which is our cube. Starts with a cube, ends with a cube. Oh, nice little circle there. And then we're going to go maybe 20 by 20 by 2. So this nice little flat area here. And we're going to come in here. And then we're going to start off by grabbing a Bend Deformer. Make it a child of our cube. And then we're going to, fit parent. And then it's not really doing what we thought it should do, and that's because we need to quickly increase our segment. So let's go 16, and let's go minus 90. Cool. So we've got the, we've got like the sort of shape that we're hoping for. Now we need to kind of make it taper inwards, and we can do that with another deformer. So let me grab a taper. Put it in between the cube and the bend. Fit to parent, and now if we just do this, maybe put it on something like 95, and it's the wrong way around, so we're just going to hit the R key. I'm just going to do a little quick 180 with it, and now we have our rocket fin. So now he can fly. It's all good. All we're going to do now is duplicate this a couple of times. Move it over, hit the R key, rotate it round 180, and then we're just going to position this on here. This is all by eye. We could do this kind of like we could perfect this by using our 4 views and things like that, but we're just going to eyeball it for now because I'm conscious that we haven't got loads of time left. So let me just grab my 3rd one, and we're going to drop this in. Pull this out. Cool, right. And then for the last time, we're going to make sure I grab everything, group it into our left leg, and we're going to copy it, make it our right leg, just quickly rotate it, and then come into our 4 views just so we can, position it a little bit better. Now we're in there. And then the last bit is just this one here. We need to move to the back. And go on, a few more. There we go.
Done the rotate tool.
It's over, that's what it is. He was like, I don't want to do it. And it's done. There is our little robot guy.
Hooray!
With only primitives and deformers. So
That's
yeah.
Yeah, of course, that's why we were avoiding generators, weren't we? We were trying to do super simple. Sorry.
Yes, I wanted to. It was our challenge, wasn't it, to make something cool with just deformers.
Yeah, so whilst there was opportunity there that perhaps we could have used the symmetry object, the symmetry object will only duplicate something as long as it stays the same. So like if we wanted the earphones on the head to be able to return separately, you couldn't use a symmetry object. If you want the left arm to go up and have the right arm go down, you couldn't use a symmetry object. That's the only sort of like mirroring tool that we have. It creates exactly the same copy. It doesn't create a duplicate mirrored. We don't actually have that in Cinema 4D, which is mildly infuriating. But you can obviously see that you can create a whole load of things like that. Do you want to show the attributes manager rather than throwing it at me in the last 10 minutes for materials, or are we not materializing him today? I can't remember.
We were going to, but I think because there's only a short amount of time left, I was going to do a quick Q&A and then run through what we're going to do next week. Or would you like to quickly show? It's entirely up to you.
I mean, we could do it. It would take all of about 3 minutes, I think, if you just show the attributes manager whilst on the screen. Sorry, the asset manager.
Yes, it's okay. I knew what you meant.
Good. I didn't. But so one thing that's new inside of Cinema 4D, we've always had a content browser library which has had a plethora of materials and all sorts of fun things like that we can use. The asset browser now is entirely online and can be brought up using the little button in the middle of our icons at the top there, and it will bring up our asset browser. Now this has, as you can see, a whole load of different folders that we can look at and experiment and work our way through, as well as a super useful search bar at the top. And it's got so many preset materials or objects and things that we can select and grab and download and apply to our little robot so that within the next 3 minutes, we could have him fully textured. You can see that we've got a materials folder on the left, we've got metals, we've got glosses, fabrics, ceramics. For some reason, there's always milk somewhere. So you can just, to get these attributes, just select on one of the materials that you want and double click, and it will download that material, and you can see that the cloud icon has disappeared and it now appears in the materials manager in the bottom left hand corner, and we can just quickly click and drag, God, I'll put my teeth in, to the objects that we want them to be on. And it's just a real fast way of getting something that looks a little bit snazzy in a very short period of time.
So what else should we grab? Let's grab some other bits. So yeah, it's a super nice way of like really quickly just texturing before we get to week 3, when we go through actual like lighting and texturing, and we can make some of our own material elements. What should we grab? Get some car paint. Ooh. We can just texture this guy. You know what? I can't even remember. I made the original one. I can't even remember the poor materials that I used. What else should we grab? What else should we grab? Glass. Look at this guy.
We have some questions. Oh, apparently the mirror tool under the character will allow us to duplicate an entire, so it shows how much character stuff we do. The mirror tool under character menu will allow you to create a separate object with its own attributes. Thank you, Carlo. That's very useful to know. People who are struggling to get the asset browser, it is in S24 only, the asset browser. For those people who do not have S24, there is a content browser, and Elly will just demonstrate where the content browser used to be, which is over on the right hand side where objects
yes,
and
it was originally here. There should be a little tab.
Yeah, so if you are on R21, S22 or R23, you will have the content browser on the right hand side as long as you've downloaded it. It is 12 gig, which is why it was always such a hefty download and why we've decided to move it to an online library so that you don't have to download and fill your hard drive up with all of the materials.
This guy looks super weird with these materials now, but
he's very shiny.
It gives you the idea that you can, you know, if you have been following along, or if you have access to the project file version, which is untextured, you can, you know, drop your own textures on there.
Yep, and remember, you just double click on the material you want in the attributes manager, in the asset browser, I will get the name right, and then that will put it in the materials in the bottom left hand corner. And all you need to do to apply your materials is click and drag with the mouse from the material to the item that you want to be that color. So we will go through materials in more detail and how to make your own and things like that during the materials section in week 3, 4,
yeah.
3.
3? Yes, 3, definitely.
So don't worry. This was just a kind of quick glimpse, if we had some time, that there is a whole load of preset stuff here that you can have some fun with and apply to your robot to give him just a little bit of life whilst we are wrapping up.
Yeah. So are there any questions before we do our final little bit?
Not really. Very quick one. What is the difference between R and S in our numbering? So the R numbers, what we always had up until R21, it basically stands for release. Then we started to do a subscription, which means that there was a 6 monthly sort of ish release cycle. So we had R21, and then 6 months later we had a subscription only release, which was S22. Then you have R23, and we are currently on S24. The Maxon 1 student license allows for use with S22, R23, and S24. If you have perpetual licenses of anything, then you are locked to the version of which you have the perpetual license for. But I think most of you will be on subscriptions.
Probably. Okay, cool. So yes, let's have a quick look. So, okay, if you want to have access to the project files, you can come over to our maxon.net website, and then under news and events, this is probably the same place where you saw that we have this hands-on workshop, and the same place that you registered. If you click on any of the hands-on with Maxon Cinema 4D beginners workshop ones, we've got part 1 to 6 on the events page. If we scroll down to the bottom, we have this download project file option, and this has at the moment it's just got an overview and it's got week 1 in there, but by tomorrow it's going to also have next week's project file on there as well. And what we'll do, we'll make sure that they're on there before the actual session. So we'll make sure that, yeah, next week's one is on there tomorrow, so you can always have a look at those as and when you want to. Also, I have to mention this because, you know, of all the work that all the guys in the training team do, majority of our stuff and our webinars and our sessions are all recorded and are all on our Maxon training team YouTube channel. So there's so many things, including, you know, all of our Ask the Trainer stuff, and, you know, all of our demystifying post-production sessions as well. Regarding these sessions, they are being recorded. Yes, I forgot to mention that at the beginning. I apologize, but they are being recorded. So if you have registered, you will have access to these links. They will not be put on YouTube live, but all of you guys who, you know, have been watching us and have registered will have access to those. We might even kind of unlist them on here. And before we kind of sign off, next week. So next week is all things modeling. So, you know, different types of modeling, a whole bunch of things that was already suggested, you know, like things like symmetry and like the ball generators. We're going to be going through all of that kind of stuff, as well as subdivision surface, volume modeling, and we're going to model our own shelf scene using all of those things that we have that we'll be learning in the first half of that. And as I said, you know, we'll have that project file on there for tomorrow, and it will be week 2 modeling. And yeah, it's been so fun. Like, we've absolutely loved like preparing for this workshop, and we hope that you guys have like really enjoyed this first session with us. It's so nice to have you guys here watching us live, and those of you who aren't watching us live, who, you know, are watching the recording later on. Thank you so much for being part of this entirely new workshop series, and thank you for all of your questions and all of your kind of nice comments. Like, we really appreciate it.
Yeah,
and,
we do. Thank you for so those people, you know, who are firing us questions and coming up with suggestions, people who are watching in the background as well. It's really appreciated, that, you know, your feedback, and this is what it is for. You know, we want this to be live, so ask us the questions and we'll do what we can to answer so that we can help out. Otherwise it's just, you know, watching a video. But we guys, you know, we really like the interaction that we can have. So thank you very much to, you know, to our regulars, and thank you for all those lovely comments that we're getting from people at the moment. So yeah, and we'll look forward to seeing you all again next week.
Yeah, see you all next week.